Thank you for joining us this morning. I'm Beth Kurtula. I'm the House Democratic Leader, and with me this morning, Berta Gardner, the Whip from Anchorage, and Representative Pete Peterson, also from Anchorage. We're almost halfway done with session. Things have been really speeding up, lots of bills moving, lots of budgets getting written. From the House Democratic Caucus's perspective, I've got to say that, the things that we're looking at is how do we use our resources for the future? How do we use the non-renewable resources so that Alaska has a bright future? I think that energy and education are two of the best ways to invest in Alaska's future. In energy, we've been meeting with municipal leaders from across the state about their energy issues. And while some of us have fairly affordable energy, many do not. When you talk to the smaller communities, they're paying enormous prices, and now, of course, Fairbanks itself is having terrible energy problems. Last year, the governor vetoed $100 million in community energy programs. This year, we're looking at some of those same programs, and I think it's a very important focus for the rest of session to remember that while oil prices may be high, and that may help us as a state, as an individual or as a family, it really, really can hurt. On education, the Senate moved a bill over to us to increase the base student allocation. That's a good start. But, we believe that education is the ultimate investment, not the ultimate giveaway. And that's a big delineation from where other representatives and the governor are coming from. So we're continuing to push as hard as we can to see real investment in education so our students can not just do well, but excel. So with that, I'm going to turn first to Berta to talk a little bit about Democratic bills that are moving, and then we'll talk to Pete. Berta.
Okay. First of all, I want to say that we're all really pleased with the passage of Representative Guerra's Fishing Stream Access Bill. It is, I think, a sweet little bill that we cannot overstate the importance of for Alaskans across the state who just love to fish so much, and it's time sensitive, and it's an effort to retain in the public from willing landowners access to fishing streams all over the state. So I think that's a really nice little bill. Coming up on Wednesday in House Education will be Representative Guerra's bill to reduce the price of student loans for those Alaskan students who choose to continue their education beyond high school and who are going to stay in the state. I think that's a really important issue. Representative Peterson's bill on expanding optional, opt-in, municipal property tax exemptions is up in Community Regional Affairs on Thursday. My bill saying that minors who are driving cannot talk on cell phones will get a second hearing in House Transportation on Thursday, hopefully move from there. And then Representative Peterson has legislation requiring that sex offenders who are on probation not be allowed to keep play equipment, which attract children, in their yards. To me, that's an obvious probationary requirement. So I'm hoping that bill will move forward. And then finally, the bill that I have on oil and gas disclosures when people apply for credits, when taxpayers apply for credits, I'm hoping will come up again in House Resources. So that's what we're working on.
Thanks, Berta. I'm going to ask Representative Peterson to say a few words, but before he does, I just want to say that Pete has been the sponsor of some really great legislation in previous years and this year, and that one of the pieces of legislation that he's been a big champion of just moved out of the Senate. Sometimes during session, we put bills in both houses and work with the other side, and that's what happened here. But Pete, you've been a real champion of autism, of helping our children, and the statistics are really frightening. 1 in 110 children has autism. And Pete, last week when we had the Key campaign here, many of the people who came to see me spoke specifically about that. So congratulations on that bill coming over from the Senate, and also I'd like you to say a few words about that and also on the base student education issue.
Okay. Thank you, Representative Kurtula. I was very pleased when the Senate passed SB 74, the autism insurance mandate, last week, and it was passed in a bipartisan way. There were numerous people from both sides of the aisle voting in favor of that bill, And so we're hoping it can continue to move through the House in a bipartisan manner. And looking at the number of cross-sponsorships, there are people from both parties, an equal number so far, that have cross-sponsored that bill. I believe it's important that we not only look at what the potential cost of passing the legislation is, but you have to look at the potential savings down the road for education and social services if you get these children the help they need when they're in an early developmental stage, age 3 and 4. And as far as the base student allocation is concerned, the bill that was sent over here by the Senate would increase the BSA by $125 this year. That really is not even enough to have kept up with inflation, but we do need to continue to move forward with education, and I believe by not passing that legislation, we're going to allow our education across the state to go backwards. And if we want to reach our goal of having higher graduation rates, fewer dropouts, more children going on to college, I think we need to invest in that, and it's an investment in the future. It's not a giveaway.
Thank you. Okay, we're open for questions. Dan?
Because I don't know the names yet, but for the minority whip.
Yes.
I don't know if you may not be able to answer this because it's, Les's bill, but the folks back in Anchorage were asking, does this have effect on native corporations and land ownership with regard to public access to streams? Again, I don't know if you'd know that. That's a pretty specific.
Well, yeah, if you get a chance to speak with him directly, that's probably good. But the idea is that it directs the Department of Natural Resources to make efforts to bring land into the public domain and fishing stream access from voluntary current landowners. And what they're going to be doing, if it gets the governor's signature, is do an annual report to the legislature on their activities to promote fishing stream access in the preceding year and their plans for the future year. And then, of course, it theoretically supports buying land if it's available for sale. And it wouldn't matter if whose land it is.
Follow up, if I may, would it also apply to maybe access to public parks, or do you know?
It's focused specifically on fishing streams.
Fishing streams, okay.
Yeah.
The questions?
Just a question on BSA. The Senate bill did move over, and what's the timeline on that as far as when it will actually start getting through committees and get hearings?
We think that should have happened last year. The question was about the timeline on getting the BSA, the base student allocation bill, moving. We think that what the Senate did was a good start in the House Democratic Caucus, but it really doesn't go far enough for long enough. And my fear is that that bill is going to become a one-year funding all over again. It's not going to do what we need to see it to do. I'm going to let Pete say just a few words about where we think it should go, but again, that should happen more quickly than not, but I'm afraid it probably won't. Pete?
Well, we did have some one-time funding last year that kept our fingers in the dike, so to speak, for one more year. And here we are again, spending weeks and weeks debating whether we're going to increase the base student allocation. And meanwhile, school districts all across the state are planning layoffs and getting ready to send out pink slips to educators. And we've been making progress in our test scores and our graduation rates. I've had school districts in my office from all over the state showing me numbers that are improving. So now is not the time to pull the plug on public education. And so this BSA bill that the Senate passed close to 2 weeks ago now is gathering dust in the House Education Committee. And so I do believe that the chairman of that committee needs to step forward and have a hearing on that bill as soon as possible, because these students and these schools across the state need some help.
Other questions? Back to Austin.
Just to follow up on that, would the caucus be happy with the Senate bill if that went through, and something like the pupil transportation bills that are being considered in the House and the Senate, where it would give some increase to the BSA and then add funding to the point that it's not dropping off and it's not losing more? Is that? something
It
the
wouldn't,
caucus would be happy with.
if the question was, would that make us happy? I don't think so. You know, sometimes, I think our job as leaders is to say what we think is the right thing for education, for energy, for Alaska. And in education, it is absolutely clear that we have not met even the basics. We have 66 people in Juneau who are going to be laid off if the legislature doesn't change this picture. And we have the power. Not only do we have the power, we've got the funds. That's what's so frustrating about the situation we're in. I think what would make us happy is to see forward funding for education, see Representative Peterson's very common sense idea of just meeting inflation so that our kids aren't falling behind year by year, and then see those kinds of costs that hit, all Alaskans, transportation, heating, energy, and really build our schools back up so we have a first-class education system. Berta?
And let's remember that if you look at the governor's proposal, department by department, statewide, education has the smallest increase of any department in the state. When I first was elected to office, somebody said to me that the budget is policy translated into dollars. And if education is our lowest priority based on the budget, then we are not meeting the needs of our kids.
Well, it's all about commitment. You have to make the commitment to educate our young people. And by debating funding year after year after year, I don't believe we've made that commitment.
I heard our school superintendent say just about exactly the same thing. What does it tell our children? What does it tell our students when we're unwilling to fund their education and unwilling to support them? What does that say to our children? And that's really stuck with me this year. Go ahead, Dan.
For any of you, is the assumption for the upcoming fiscal year based on a price of $97 a barrel oil, and are we not substantially above that in terms of, increasing funding for education and other?
I can't remember what the forecast was, Dan, but it had to be somewhere right around there. It seems pretty clear right at the moment that the price of oil is going to continue to go up. We're starting to see higher and higher prices, and that just, that puts us back in the Alaskan conundrum, right? The price of oil goes up, so does the cost of heating, so does the cost of fuel, so does the cost of gas, and that's something that I think, as leaders have a real duty to be sure that when the price goes up, we're meeting the commensurate need. Berta, do you have anything else on that? Or?
Not on that, no.
All right.
But, I would like to talk, if I might, a little bit about the Speaker's bill that passed House Resources Committee, and it's the in-state gas pipeline bill, and I am opposed to it. There were two reasons given for promoting this bill. One is to get gas as quickly as possible to Alaskan consumers, and secondly, to get the cheapest gas possible to Alaskan consumers. And those are in conflict with each other. I mean, we know that. When you go for speed, you sacrifice, you pay more, and if you go for getting it lowest price, and it takes a little longer. So that's a first concern. More importantly, the proposal takes gas from the North Slope to the rail belt on what we believe is the wrong route. It bypasses Fairbanks, it bypasses North Pole, it bypasses the critical military bases, and price of energy is one of the things that is a consideration for military bases when they make their planning. It bypasses the vast mineral resource potential along the Richardson Highway. It has only 2 offtake points for the state. It has no economies of scale and potentially locks Alaskan consumers into high tariffs, high transportation costs for decades to come, and it offers no substantial new revenue to the state of Alaska. And all of this is aside from the fact that it sort of guts the Alaska Natural Gas Line Development Agency, which was put into place with a 64% vote of Alaskan citizens. I think it's the wrong project, and I think it's wrong-headed, and the only thing that puzzles me is why anybody does this. Oh, and the other thing about it is it brings gas from the North Slope to the rail belt, potentially undercutting development efforts in Cook Inlet. And we've focused a lot on trying to promote exploration and economic recovery of gas in Cook Inlet. So why would we then bring gas down from the North Slope to tell all of those explorers who have invested a lot of money that we're taking their market away from them, by the way. So I hope that bill dies a prompt natural death.
Austin?
Representative Peterson, with the hearing yesterday on the sex offender bill, what are your thoughts with some of the criticisms there and just what the path ahead is for that bill?
Well, this was the first hearing we've had on the bill. It was strictly a one-sentence change to the sex offender law, and we just had a debate going on in the legal department when they were writing the bill, trying to decide what phrase to use, what words to use to make it fit the current statute. And so the committee felt that they liked the idea, but we just had to make sure that the language would do exactly what we wanted it to do. So we are working with members of the committee and the legal department to clarify that language so that bill can move.
But that's a tremendous idea. I mean, it's something that I can't believe we haven't thought of earlier. I mean, anyone who's been convicted of sex offenses should never have anything that would attract children to their yards or to themselves. I mean, how did you get the idea for the bill?
Well, unfortunately, there was an incident in my district where a sex offender bought a trampoline to try to attract children who just happened to be walking on their way home from school by his residence, and ended up molesting 3 young girls. And so, unfortunately, we're sort of closing the barn door after the horse already got out. But this would just give the probation court a chance to add one more area that might solve this problem from happening again.
Yeah, that should never happen.
Right.
Allison, was it a follow-up on this?
So just what are your thoughts on some of the points by Representative Gruenberg and also the ACLU, the man who spoke for them, as far as the constitutional questions of restrictions already in place on sex offenders' computer use and privacy rights and things of those nature?
Well, I wasn't intending to get into the weeds, so to speak, to talk about every single aspect of the current law, and it hasn't been challenged that I'm aware of by the ACLU recently. So I was a little surprised when Jeffrey Mittman mentioned that he thought maybe there were already some segments of that law that were unconstitutional, and so I'm not a constitutional attorney. So I'm not sure where that is going to go, but I believe that the intent of the law is the right thing to do, and I'm going to try to continue to move forward with it.
No sex offender should have playground equipment in their yard to attract children to it. That's just a absolute, yeah.
Improper lure.
Dan?
For Representative Peterson, we shot a little bit of the demonstration, the Keys demonstration the other day. Do you have any idea how far this autism bill that's now moving through the process goes toward answering their concerns down there?
Oh, well, thanks for the question. It was one of their top priorities and has been ever since I filed that bill originally in 2009. And we've been working with them, to try to make sure the bill will do what they think it should do, and we've used patterns from states that have already passed this legislation, and currently 29 other states have passed autism insurance mandate. When I first introduced this bill in 2009, 9 states had passed it. So 20 other states have passed this while we've been trying to work it through the process. So it's important that this bill move, because one problem we have in Alaska is we don't have a lot of medical experts, and not only in dealing with autism, but in many other medical fields. But specifically with autism, we need to attract some people who've got some expertise. And the state of Missouri passed this bill in 2010, and it went into effect January 1st last year. By the end of 2011, they had issued 120 business licenses to professionals with expertise in autism. So if we pass this mandate, I believe we'll be attracting some medical professionals to help the children and families with autism in Alaska.
You would argue it would save taxpayers in the long run because if you deal with the developmental issues early, then folks become more self-sufficient.
That's correct. They are able to diagnose now, the most recent technology allows them to diagnose as early as 6 months now. And so when a child's brain is developing, they say 2, 3, 4 years old, they can start doing the therapies to get their brains rewired and wired correctly so that approximately 45% of those that are diagnosed with autism will be able to be in a regular classroom with their classmates and not need special education. So the cost of special education is extremely expensive compared to the regular classroom costs. So we would be saving school districts all across the state a large amount of money.
45% as opposed to 0%?
Well, if they don't get the help,
Yeah.
then they would all need special education, and maybe later in life, they would need, to be put in some sort of supervision for maybe the rest of their life, and so they would have no opportunity to contribute to our society in any way. So the long-term costs of not doing anything are in the millions of dollars per person, per individual with autism. So,
Thanks, Pete. Pat, and then we'll go offline. Pat?
The Senate has been spending a lot of time looking at oil tax rewrite. What evidence have you seen that the current tax system isn't working? Or what's the best evidence you've seen that it's not working?
We're watching the Senate, and we talked about this before coming down today. What evidence have we seen? I don't think we've seen much, if any, evidence that the current oil tax system isn't working, and that's what we want to see. We're waiting for the legislation to come across to the House, then to talk about it, have our own debate, and see the information. One of the things Representative Gardner's been a real leader on is, let's get the information about what's happening. What are we getting for our credits? And that's the same thing. I think Representative Peterson had kind of a nice quote this morning, so I'm going to let him deliver it rather than stealing it. But Pete?
show me the oil. If you want to get your taxes lowered, show us the oil, show us the production, we'll give you the credits. But to expect us to give you a blank check, I don't think that's the right thing to do. We've heard many times over the years that, well, why can't the state act more like a business? That should be run, our state government, like a business. Well, I don't know a business anywhere that would give away $2 billion without some sort of guaranteed return. So I just got to say, show me the oil.
Britta?
And let's remember the various permutations of the causes and the reasons that were given to support the governor's tax giveaway bill. And first of all, it was that we're losing jobs on the North Slope. That was the evidence. And then the Department of Labor said, well, the reports filed by the industry indicate that actually employment is at an all-time high. And then they said, well, we're permitting's down. Well, that's not true. We have new permits coming in for explorers and for development. We have more taxpayers. I don't remember the numbers offhand. I think about 3 times as many taxpayers today as we had before the passage of ACES. By taxpayers, I mean oil and gas companies that are actually producing and have tax bills. So, I mean, clearly, the rationales given have not held up. And so we'll see. But, we need to have some evidence, as Representative Peterson said. And we've been able to find that the reasons that they've provided to us don't hold up.
So we'll wait and see what happens when we get it. A quick follow-up by Pat, and then I'd like to take some of the offline people. Pat?
A number of the senators have said things like the oil companies have come into our office and told us this and that, and said stuff that I've never heard in public testimony. Have oil company representatives been coming into your offices and giving you evidence that ACES isn't working, or that if taxes are reduced, they'll do new investment?
I could stand to be corrected, but I don't think I've had one this session. Britta, have you had anyone?
I will tell you that when ACES was under discussion originally, I had oil company representatives in our office saying that they liked it but couldn't say so on the record.
Anyone visit you this
I
session?
haven't had anyone from an oil company in my office. I think they're concentrating on the Senate right
Yeah,
now.
that may change when the bill comes over. We'll see, but we're remaining firm. We're not changing till we see the need to do it, and that hasn't appeared yet.
And we're following what's going on in the Senate Resources Committee very closely.
I'm going to go offline. I've got 3 people. Pete, are you there? Would you like to ask a question? Maybe not. Do I have Mike or Amanda?
Yeah, you have Amanda.
Whoops. Can I let Amanda go first? Go ahead, Amanda.
Hi, it's Amanda Coyne with the Alaska Dispatch. I'm going to ask a question, and then if you and whoever is responding, if you could tell me who you are that's responding, that would be great because I can't see your
Sure.
faces right now. The governor today sent out an action alert to pass his oil tax legislation, and one of the sentences in the alert says, "At high prices, Alaska's oil production tax is the least competitive among all oil-producing regions in the Western Hemisphere." Some of the information that I've received, and certainly you all have received, kind of seems to contradict that, and I'm wondering if there's anybody that can speak to that statement.
So as I understand it, the question was the governor sent out some kind of an alert, which I haven't seen, saying
Yeah, let
something
me
about.
just repeat. Do you want me to repeat what?
No, I think we got it. I just want to repeat it for the audience, that at high prices, Alaska is uncompetitive. I don't think that's accurate. Berta, have you?
We haven't seen that statement, but we have to be very careful when they talk about what our rate is, because the rate can be calculated in a variety of ways. And when it's done to make a point, they use the part that best makes their point, and it isn't necessarily what the reality is, whether you're talking about the nominal rate or the effective rate, and what kind of credits. And there are other terms in addition. It isn't just the tax rate, it's the fact that we allow them to write off all of their costs in the first year. We allow them to sell their credits if they don't have a tax bill due. So there are a host of other elements that go into whether or not a place is competitive. And then we have to remember always that the biggest single factor is prospectivity. And Alaska has prospectivity. That means we know we've got the resource, and that is the biggest single factor. It doesn't matter what your tax rate is. It doesn't matter anything else if you don't have the resource, and we've got it.
And that I just want to reiterate that. I mean, you don't need Uzis to be on the North Slope. And we're becoming ever more safe, whereas the rest of the world is becoming ever more dangerous. So I agree completely with what Berta said. Thanks, Amanda. Real quickly, Mike, I think you had a question too.
Yes, Mike Mason with KDLG Public Radio in Dillingham. I listened to an interesting discussion yesterday in the Senate Finance Committee regarding a bill called Senate Bill 170. And basically it requires public schools to provide vocational education, which many schools already do, but apparently a lot of schools don't offer that counseling and those opportunities. I know that bill has not made it to the House, but I thought I could ask a bigger question about the importance of not just funding for public education, funding for higher education, but providing those vocational education opportunities to students that might not want to go to college or have the skill set to go to college.
Okay, I'm going to let Representative Peterson answer that. Thank you, Mike.
Well, back in the 70s and 80s, the Alaskan education system was rated to have one of the top voc tech programs in the country. And unfortunately, during some budget cuts and in some tough economic times in the mid to late 80s, those programs were cut out of the budget and have never been brought back until recently. We've started to add enough funding in to allow the school districts to start adding more of those programs. And I believe that is one of the reasons why the dropout rates have slowed down in some areas, because we're offering more options to students other than, well, you need to get these courses so you can go to college. There are some students who don't plan to go to college that want to get a job in a technical or vocational type field, and if they can get those classes while they're still in high school, that will help them stay in school and graduate. So I think we do need to continue to rebuild our voc tech program across the state.
Berta?
I agree absolutely with Representative Peterson, but I want to point out that vocational education isn't just for those students who don't see themselves as going to college. It's a value to all students. So we definitely support that.
Yeah, the caucus has always stood firm on supporting vocational education, and around the state, you can see the great things that that brings to our students. So with that, that's our end of our press availability. Thank you for, oh, Dan, one really quick question?
Yeah, I shot the gentleman who hasn't eaten, I guess now in 22 days. He's still having, trouble meeting with folks, trying to get Senate Bill 3 past the meal bill. I was just wondering, what your thoughts are on this hunger strike as a mechanism for advancing this, and what your thoughts are on the bill and what should happen to it.
Berta, and that's the last question then. Go ahead.
Please make his effort known. Let's keep the pressure up, and I support, I support the effort to provide school lunches and breakfasts.
Is anything going to happen with this, or?
Thank you. I think we're at the end of our, we support it. We want him to be safe. Thank you.